I couldn't move. That was the first thing I registered when consciousness returned to me. Not the cold metal beneath my back, not the blinding white light burning into my retinas, not even the figures standing over me with their impossible, elongated bodies. It was the absolute, suffocating paralysis that gripped every muscle in my body. I wanted to scream. My mouth wouldn't open. I wanted to thrash, to fight, to run. My limbs remained frozen, dead weight attached to a mind spiraling into pure animal terror. My name is Daniel Frost. I'm 42 years old. I'm an astrophysicist at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I have a daughter named Emma, who just turned 16. I drive a 2015 Honda Accord. I was driving home from the observatory at 11:47 at night when the sky above Route 36 turned the wrong color. These are the facts I clung to as my sanity threatened to shatter into 1,000 pieces on that table. These are the anchors I used to keep myself from drowning in the impossibility of what was happening to me. The beings, and I refuse to call them anything else because no other word fits, moved around me with mechanical precision. They were tall, too tall, 7 feet, maybe 8. Their bodies were thin in a way that violated every principle of biology I'd spent 2 decades studying. Limbs like stretched taffy, fingers with too many joints, and their heads. God, their heads. Oversized and hairless with skin that seemed to shift between gray and something almost translucent, like I was looking through fog at something solid beneath. But it was their eyes that destroyed me. Enormous black voids that reflected nothing, absorbed everything, and somehow conveyed an intelligence so vast and ancient that my own mind felt like a candle flickering before a star. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me, into me, reading every memory, every fear, every secret I'd ever buried in the deepest corners of my consciousness. One of them leaned closer. I felt its presence before I saw it move, like a shift in atmospheric pressure before a storm. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Sweat poured down my temples despite the cold. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, but my body remained a prison, and I was trapped inside it with my mounting terror. Then it spoke. Not with its mouth. I don't think it had one, not in any conventional sense. The words formed directly inside my skull, bypassing my ears entirely, resonating in a place deeper than thought. The voice was neutral, neither male nor female, but absolutely clear. Perfect English with no accent, no emotion, just crystalline precision. Daniel Frost, astrophysicist, born April 9th, 1983. Father deceased, divorced, 1 child. It paused, and in that pause, I felt something probe deeper, peeling back layers of my psyche like pages in a book. You have been searching for us your entire life, your telescopes, your equations, your desperate need to prove you are not alone in the universe. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell this thing that I was a scientist, that I dealt in evidence and data, not belief and hope. But it was right. Every night I spent staring at distant galaxies, every paper I published on the possibility of extraterrestrial life, every childhood memory of lying in my backyard, wondering if something out there was wondering about me. It had all been a search, a longing for contact that I'd dressed up in academic language in peer-reviewed journals. You are one of the marked ones, it said, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The 144,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I knew it. Of course I knew it. I'd been raised Baptist before my parents' divorce shattered what little faith our family possessed. Sunday school lessons about Revelation, about the sealed servants of God, about the chosen ones who would survive the end times. I'd dismissed it all as mythology by the time I turned 15, comforting stories for people afraid of death and meaninglessness. But hearing those words here, in this impossible place, from this impossible being, transformed mythology into something that tasted like prophecy. What does that mean? I tried to say, but my lips wouldn't move. The thought formed anyway, broadcast somehow into the space between us. The being tilted its head, and I had the distinct impression it was pleased. You will understand soon. The marking has already begun. You have always been marked. We have simply confirmed what was written before you took your first breath. Then the light intensified until it consumed everything. The beings, the room, my fear. Reality itself bleached white and empty, and I fell into it like falling into snow. I woke up behind the wheel of my Honda. The engine was still running. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The dashboard clock read 11:49. 2 minutes. Only 2 minutes had passed according to the car, but my body felt like I'd been gone for hours. My shirt was soaked with sweat. My head pounded with a migraine that made my vision blur. And on my left wrist, just below the palm, were 3 circles. Interlocking. Precise. Raised slightly from the skin like a brand, but there was no pain, no redness, no sign of burning. Just 3 perfect circles that definitely, absolutely, had not been there when I left the observatory. What you're about to hear has been kept from humanity for thousands of years. I'm telling you this now because what happened to me that night was just the beginning. And if you're watching this, if something inside you recognized the truth in those words, then maybe you're marked too. This isn't comfortable. Everything you think you know about reality is about to shatter. But if you're ready to see what's really happening, you need to subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because the story I'm about to tell you will change everything you believe about who we are and why we're really here. I sat in that car for 20 minutes, staring at those circles, waiting for them to disappear. They didn't. And somewhere deep in my mind, in a place that predated logic and reason, I knew they never would. I drove home on autopilot, muscle memory guiding the car through familiar streets while my mind spun in tightening circles. The mark on my wrist seemed to pulse with heat, though when I touched it, the skin felt perfectly normal. Room temperature, no inflammation, no scarring. Just 3 interlocking circles etched into my flesh as if they'd always been there. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd already constructed 17 different rational explanations. A micro-seizure while driving, temporal lobe epilepsy causing vivid hallucinations, sleep deprivation. I'd been pulling 18-hour days at the observatory for the past 3 weeks, carbon monoxide leak in the car, early onset schizophrenia, though I had no family history, mass hysteria absorbed from too many late-night documentaries about UFOs that I watched ironically, laughing at the poor deluded souls who believed they'd been taken. I wasn't laughing now. Inside my empty house, I went straight to the bathroom and scrubbed my wrist under hot water. Soap, then hand sanitizer, then rubbing alcohol that made my eyes water. The circles remained perfect, unblemished, mocking my attempts to erase them. I grabbed a rough washcloth and scraped until my skin turned red and raw around the marks. The circles themselves wouldn't fade, wouldn't smudge. It was like they existed beneath the top layer of skin, visible but untouchable. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and forced myself to breathe. In through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Out through the mouth for 8. It was a technique my therapist had taught me during the divorce, when panic attacks became a regular visitor in the middle of the night. It worked then. It wasn't working now. The memory of that room, those beings, that voice inside my head, it wasn't fading the way dreams fade. It was becoming sharper, more detailed. I could recall the exact texture of the metal beneath my back, the specific frequency of the humming that filled the air, the way that creature's presence felt like gravity itself was bending around it. This wasn't how hallucinations worked. I knew the neuroscience. False memories degraded rapidly, became fuzzy at the edges, contradicted themselves under examination. This memory was crystalline, unshakable, real. No. I caught myself. That's exactly what someone experiencing a psychotic break would think. That's the insidious nature of delusion. It feels more real than reality itself. I needed to approach this scientifically, gather data, test hypotheses, find the rational explanation that my panicking brain was preventing me from seeing. I opened my laptop and started searching. 3 interlocking circles, abduction mark, missing time. Route 36, Boulder, Colorado. My search history would look insane to anyone who saw it, but I was alone. Emma was at her mother's house this week. No one would know about my temporary lapse into madness, except me. What I found made my hands shake so badly, I had to set down my coffee mug before I dropped it. Thousands of results. Forums, websites, personal testimonies, poorly produced videos of people crying as they showed their marks to cameras. Some had circles like mine. Others had triangles, spirals, symbols that looked like circuit boards or ancient languages. All of them told similar stories. Missing time, paralysis, beings with impossible anatomy, messages about being chosen, being marked, being part of something larger than they could comprehend. The rational part of my brain immediately cataloged this as exactly what I'd expect to find. UFO mythology had been part of popular culture since the 1940s. Roswell, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, Close Encounters and X-Files and ancient aliens filling people's heads with archetypal narratives, pattern-seeking brains finding meaning in randomness. Mass delusion spread through social contagion. I'd read the papers. I knew the psychology. But I'd never read these stories before tonight. I'd never looked at these websites, never absorbed these specific details. Yet my experience matched theirs with disturbing precision. The paralysis, the examination, the telepathic communication. Even the number, the 144,000, appeared again and again in these testimonies, people from different countries, different decades, all claiming they'd been told they were part of this specific group. Coincidence, I told myself. Confirmation bias. I'd absorbed this information somewhere, some late night falling down an internet rabbit hole I didn't remember, and my stressed, exhausted brain had assembled it into a convincing hallucination. I slammed the laptop shut and went to bed. Sleep didn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every sound. The house settling, the furnace clicking on, a car passing on the street outside. Any of those sounds could be them returning, coming back for me, finishing whatever they'd started. By 3 a.m, I'd convinced myself it was a dream, a stress-induced episode, nothing more. I'd go to work tomorrow, focus on my research, avoid caffeine and get more sleep. In a week, this would be an embarrassing story I'd never tell anyone. In a month, I'd barely remember it. I almost believed it. Then I lifted my wrist in the darkness and saw the circles glowing, actually glowing. A faint bioluminescence like deep-sea creatures or foxfire mushrooms, pulsing gently in rhythm with my heartbeat. I watched that impossible light for 10 minutes, scientific objectivity crumbling with each pulse. When I finally fell, asleep just before dawn, I dreamed of stars that were watching me, waiting for me, calling me home to a place I'd never been but somehow remembered. The next morning, the glow was gone, but the circles remained, and so did the knowledge that my life as I'd known it was over. 3 weeks of pretending I was fine. 3 weeks of showing up to the observatory, analyzing data, teaching undergraduate astronomy labs, smiling at colleagues who asked if I was feeling all right. 3 weeks of long sleeves to hide the mark that wouldn't fade, wouldn't respond to any logical explanation I threw at it. 3 weeks of telling myself it was over, that whatever had happened was a singular event, an anomaly, a glitch in my perception that would never repeat. I was lying in bed when they came for me the second time. No warning, no lights in the sky, no missing time on the highway. One moment I was reading a paper on exoplanet atmospheres. The next moment the paper was falling from my hands and my body was lifting off the mattress, not floating, being moved, pulled upward by an invisible force that didn't care about gravity or physics or the scream that was building in my throat but couldn't escape. The ceiling didn't stop me. I passed through it like it was made of water, or like I was made of something less than matter. My bedroom disappeared. The house disappeared. Reality folded in on itself, and I was somewhere else. The same room, the same blinding white light, the same metallic table beneath my back, and the same paralyzing grip that turned my body into a prison. But this time, the terror didn't consume me entirely. There was space around it now, room to think, to observe, to notice details I'd been too panicked to register before. The walls weren't walls. They were surfaces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, shifting and reconfiguring at angles my eyes couldn't properly track. The light had no source. It simply was, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. And the beings, 3 of them this time, moved with a synchronization that suggested they were parts of a single consciousness rather than individuals. "You have adjusted," the voice said inside my mind. The same neutral tone, the same clarity. "Good. Fear clouds perception. You need to perceive clearly now." One of them moved closer, and I noticed something I'd missed during the first encounter. Its eyes weren't entirely black. There were patterns in them, geometric structures that rotated slowly, like the inner workings of some impossible machine. Looking into those eyes felt like looking into the mechanism of the universe itself. Why am I here? I managed to project the thought outward, and I felt a ripple of something that might have been approval. "To remember," it said, "to understand what you agreed to before this incarnation, to see what has been hidden from your species for too long." Before I could process that response, the being raised one elongated hand and touched 2 fingers to my forehead. The room disappeared. I was floating above Earth, but it wasn't the Earth I knew. The continents were different. The ice caps extended far beyond their current boundaries, and on the ground, in what would someday be Egypt, I watched massive stone blocks being moved through the air by technology that made our modern cranes look like children's toys. Beings, not human, not quite like the ones surrounding me now, but clearly not of Earth, worked alongside primitive humans, teaching, guiding, manipulating human development with surgical precision. The scene shifted. Sumeria. The beings were different now, shorter, stockier, but still clearly not human. They gave the humans writing, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture. The foundations of civilization weren't discovered. They were gifts, interventions, a deliberate program of advancement. Again, the scene changed. South America, Central America, the Pacific Islands. Everywhere I looked, I saw the same pattern repeating across millennia. Different beings, different methods, but always the same purpose, guiding human evolution, steering our species towards something specific, something planned. "We are not the first to visit you," the voice explained as the visions continued. "We are the latest in a long sequence of civilizations that have invested in humanity's development. Your species is not an accident. You are a project, a living library containing genetic material, consciousness patterns, and spiritual frequencies from thousands of worlds." The visions accelerated. I saw wars that history books never recorded, cataclysms that reset civilization again and again. And through it all, I saw them, the watchers, the guides, the manipulators, sometimes helping, sometimes testing, always observing, always marking certain individuals across generations. "The 144,000, I thought at them, and the vision froze. "Yes," the being confirmed. "Throughout human history, we have marked specific souls, not randomly, not arbitrarily. Each of you carries a frequency signature that makes you capable of anchoring others during periods of transition. You have been marked in lifetime after lifetime, agreement after agreement. This is not your first incarnation. It will not be your last, but this lifetime is crucial." "Why me?" The question burst out of me with desperate force. "I'm nobody. I'm just a scientist. I have no special abilities, no spiritual gifts, no—" "You were chosen before you were born," the being interrupted, and something in its tone made my non-existent blood run cold. "Before your soul entered the body you now inhabit, you stood in a place between lives and volunteered for this role. You knew it would be difficult. You knew you would forget your purpose until the time came for remembering. You knew that awakening would shatter your comfortable certainties. And you agreed anyway." The vision shifted one final time, and I saw myself, not as Daniel Frost, astrophysicist, divorced father, skeptic. I saw the being I was before birth, luminous and vast, standing among others just like me, thousands of us, volunteering, choosing, agreeing to incarnate into human form to serve as anchors during what was coming. And I watched myself, my true self, accept the mark. The vision of my pre-birth self faded, and I was back in that sterile room, back in my paralyzed body, back in the suffocating grip of reality that no longer made sense. But something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there, coiled in my chest like a living thing, but it was sharing space now with something else. Recognition. A deep, cellular knowing that what I'd just witnessed wasn't fabrication or manipulation. It was memory. The being that had shown me these things remained close, and I found myself thinking of it differently now. Not as an alien, not as a threat, as something more like a messenger. An emissary between worlds, between states of existence I'd spent my entire adult life denying were possible. "The abductions," the emissary said, responding to the question forming in my mind before I'd fully articulated it. "Your species calls them abductions. The word carries connotations of violence, of violation. This is not what occurs. What you experience is a confirmation protocol, an ancient system of verification that has been in place for longer than your recorded history." Images flooded my consciousness again, but different this time. Not historical visions, but something more immediate. I saw people, hundreds of them, thousands, scattered across every continent, every culture, every demographic. A woman in Tokyo waking up with a mark on her ankle, a man in Sao Paulo staring at symbols on his shoulder blade, a teenager in Stockholm, a grandmother in Cairo, a construction worker in Sydney, a teacher in Mumbai. All of them bearing marks, all of them confused, terrified, trying to rationalize what had happened to them. These are not experiments, the emissary continued. We are not studying you. We are not collecting genetic samples or performing tests. We are confirming identity, verifying frequency signatures, ensuring that those who agreed to be marked have successfully incarnated and are present in physical form during this specific window of time. But why? I pushed the thought outward with as much force as I could muster. Why mark us at all? What's the purpose? The 144,000. The emissary's presence seemed to intensify, and I felt the weight of ages pressing down on my consciousness. Your species believes this number is metaphor, symbolic representation from ancient texts that desperate people cling to for comfort. But metaphor is how truth survives when direct communication is impossible. The number is literal, precise. It represents the minimum number of anchored souls required to stabilize a planetary consciousness during dimensional transition. I wanted to laugh. The absurdity of it should have triggered every skeptical defense mechanism I'd spent decades building. Dimensional transition, planetary consciousness. It sounded like bad science fiction, written by someone who'd taken too many psychedelics. But I couldn't laugh, because somewhere beneath my rational mind, in a place that predated language and logic, I understood exactly what the emissary meant. You are frequency holders, it explained, and more visions came. I saw the marked ones not as separate individuals, but as points of light scattered across a dark globe. Each point pulsed with a specific rhythm, a unique signature, but all of them were harmonizing toward the same base frequency. When humanity enters periods of rapid energetic acceleration, what your ancient texts call tribulation, what your scientists might call electromagnetic instability, the collective consciousness becomes fragmented, chaotic. Without anchors, without stable frequency points, the transition results in mass psychosis, civilizational collapse. This has happened before. The vision shifted, and I saw cities I didn't recognize crumbling into dust, populations descending into violence and madness, not from war or disease or natural disaster, but from something invisible. A frequency shift that human consciousness couldn't integrate without guidance, without the marked ones to serve as stabilization points. We mark you because you have the capacity to remain coherent when others fracture, the emissary said. You have developed this capacity over many lifetimes. You have trained for this, though you do not remember the training. When the transition accelerates, and it is accelerating now, faster than previous cycles, you will find that you can hold steady while others cannot. And in holding steady, you will create pockets of stability that others can anchor to. I saw it then, not as abstract concept, but as visceral reality. I saw myself standing in a crowd of panicking people, and something about my presence, my frequency, created a bubble of calm around me. Others gravitated toward it instinctively, like drowning swimmers finding a life raft they didn't know was there. The marked woman in Tokyo did the same in her city, the man in Sao Paulo, the teenager in Stockholm. Thousands of stability points across the planet, each one creating ripples of coherence in an ocean of chaos. You are not special, the emissary said, and I felt the strange kindness in that statement. You are not chosen because you are superior, or more evolved, or more deserving than others. You are chosen because you are capable of this specific function, like a person with a rare blood type who can donate to many. like a radio tower that can broadcast a signal others can receive. You are infrastructure, human infrastructure for a transition that affects your entire species. How many of us know? I asked. How many of the 144,000 have been contacted like this? Fewer than 12,000 have been marked in this current phase, the emissary responded. The rest will be marked in the coming months as the transition accelerates. Most do not understand what has happened to them. They dismiss the experience, rationalize it, suppress the memory. You are among the first wave being given direct information because your scientific mind, once convinced, becomes an asset. You will help others understand. The paralysis began to lift from my body, sensation returning in pins and needles that felt like electricity. The sensation returning to my limbs brought with it a flood of questions that had been building behind the dam of my paralysis. But one question burned hotter than all the others, one that struck at the foundation of everything I'd built my identity around. The Bible, I said, and the emissary tilted its head in that gesture I was beginning to recognize as acknowledgement. Revelation chapter 7, the sealing of the 144,000 servants of God, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. I was raised on those stories before I learned to think critically, before I understood they were mythology. But we are saying the ancient texts preserved truth in the only form that could survive millennia of human interference. The emissary interrupted. Your species has always received information from beyond your world, sometimes clearly, more often fragmented, filtered through the limited perception of those who received it. The writers of your sacred texts were not lying. They were translating experiences and knowledge that their languages and frameworks could barely contain. Another vision unfolded, and I saw a man in robes standing on a rocky island, his eyes wide with terror and wonder as he witnessed things his first-century mind had no context for. Technology that looked like magic, beings that looked like angels or demons, because those were the only categories his culture provided. He was seeing genuine phenomena, real events, real information about humanity's future, but describing them in the only symbolic language available to him. John of Patmos, the emissary said, one of many throughout your history who received fragments of the larger truth. He saw the marking. He understood its importance, but his cultural and religious framework interpreted it through the lens of his people's covenant with their God. 12 tribes, 12,000 from each. The mathematics of his tradition imposed on a reality that transcends any single tradition. So it's not actually 12 tribes, I said, understanding crystallizing. It's not exclusively Jewish males. It's not religious at all. Religion is humanity's attempt to systematize contact with the numinous, the emissary replied. Sometimes it preserves truth. More often it obscures it beneath layers of doctrine, control, and cultural specificity. The 144,000 are not representatives of Israel. They are representatives of humanity itself, every nation, every ethnicity, every belief system, and none. What matters is not which God you worship or which prophet you follow. What matters is the frequency signature your soul carries. I saw them again in my mind's eye, the marked ones, a Muslim woman in Tehran, an atheist professor in Berlin, a Buddhist monk in Thailand, a Christian missionary in Kenya, a secular humanist in Vancouver, an indigenous shaman in Peru, all of them bearing marks, all of them part of the same network, the same infrastructure, regardless of what stories they told themselves about the nature of reality. The mark isn't religious, the emissary continued, and I felt something like reverence in its projection. It's quantum. It's a frequency signature encoded into your electromagnetic field, your DNA, the quantum foam of your cellular structure. Your scientists are only beginning to understand that consciousness is not generated by the brain but received by it, that you are essentially biological radio transmitters and receivers operating at specific frequencies. More images. I saw human cells vibrating with light, saw DNA strands pulsing with information that had nothing to do with genetic code as biology understood it, saw the electromagnetic field around the human body, what mystics called the aura, revealed as a complex antenna system capable of sending and receiving information across vast distances, across dimensions, through mechanisms that made quantum entanglement look primitive by comparison. The ancients knew this, the emissary said, not intellectually, not scientifically, but experientially. Your mystics, your prophets, your shamans, they learned to tune their biological receivers to frequencies beyond the normal human range. When they spoke of being chosen, of being sealed, of being marked by God, they were describing a real energetic phenomenon that their languages dressed in theological clothing. Enoch, I breathed, and the emissary responded immediately. The Book of Enoch. Yes, removed from your canonical Bible because it revealed too much, too clearly. Enoch wrote of the Watchers, beings from the heavens who came to earth and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. He wrote of the elect ones, those chosen before the foundation of the world to serve as righteous anchors during the coming judgment. He was describing us, describing this protocol, describing you. I saw the text in my mind, passages I'd read years ago in comparative religion classes, dismissing them as apocryphal fantasy. But now each word resonated with new meaning. The chosen ones who would stand firm when the earth shakes and the heavens are troubled. Those marked on their foreheads with the seal of the living God. Not metaphor, not spiritual poetry. Literal description of an energetic marking system that transcended the religious framework trying to contain it. The Dead Sea Scrolls preserved similar knowledge, the emissary continued. The War Scroll speaks of the sons of light battling the sons of darkness, not a physical war, a frequency war, a battle for the coherence of human consciousness during transition. The community rule describes those set apart, those purified and prepared for a coming transformation. Every tradition carries fragments of this truth. But the church, I said, anger rising in my chest. The church turned it into exclusivity, into tribalism. They made it about being the right religion, the right denomination, the right interpretation. Human institutions corrupt what they touch, the emissary replied without judgment. Human institutions corrupt what they touch, the emissary replied without judgment. This is not unique to your species, but it is pronounced in your current stage of development. Those who claim authority over spiritual truth often have the least access to it. They built walls where we intended bridges. They created hierarchies where we seeded networks. But this, too, serves a purpose. The distortion of truth creates the conditions for its rediscovery. You would not be ready to hear this if you had not first rejected the corrupted versions. The being moved, and the space around us shifted. The sterile white room dissolved into something that felt like standing in the middle of a star field, though I knew I was still on the table, still in my body. But my perception had expanded to accommodate what the emissary wanted to show me. Earth is not what you believe it to be, it said, and galaxies wheeled around us in accelerated time. Your scientists think your planet is unremarkable. One world among billions, life emerging through random chemical processes. consciousness an accident of evolution. This is not true. Earth is a living library, a genetic and spiritual repository that dozens of civilizations have invested in for millions of your years. I watched as the vision zoomed toward Earth in its distant past. The planet looked different, younger, wilder, teeming with life forms that predated anything in the fossil record. And descending from the stars came ships, beings, wave after wave of them across eons, each civilization arriving, examining, contributing something to the genetic soup of terrestrial life. You are not native to this planet in the way you think, the emissary explained. The primate species that you evolved from was seeded here deliberately, modified, enhanced. Your DNA contains genetic material from multiple star systems: Sirius, Pleiades, Arcturus, Orion, Lyra, and others you have no names for. You are a hybrid species, a deliberate creation designed to carry the genetic heritage of many civilizations in one biological form. The implications crashed over me like waves. Every religious creation story suddenly became something else. Not divine magic, not random evolution, but intentional design. Genetic engineering on a cosmic scale across millions of years by civilizations so advanced that to our ancestors they would have been indistinguishable from gods. Why? I managed to ask. Why create us? Why invest so much in one planet? Because biodiversity is the universe's insurance policy, the emissary replied. Civilizations rise and fall. Species go extinct. Even on cosmic timescales, nothing is permanent. But Earth is a backup drive, a seed bank, a living archive containing genetic codes, consciousness patterns, and evolutionary potentials from hundreds of worlds. If those civilizations face extinction, their essence survives here, encoded in humanity. I saw it then. Saw humanity not as the pinnacle of evolution, but as a container, a vessel carrying the distilled wisdom, the genetic achievements, the consciousness signatures of civilizations that had come before. We were children of the stars in the most literal sense possible, walking libraries containing volumes we couldn't read, written in languages we'd forgotten we knew. The 144,000, the emissary continued, and the vision shifted to show the marked ones again. But now I could see deeper, could see the layers of light and code woven through their bodies. You are the most concentrated expressions of this multi-civilizational heritage. Each of you carries dominant genetic sequences from specific star lineages. You are not fully human in the way your neighbors are. You are humanity plus, upgraded, enhanced with the capacity to hold higher frequencies because your DNA was designed specifically for this purpose across multiple lifetimes. That's why we were chosen, I breathed. Not because we're special or more spiritual, because we're literally built for it. Our biology can handle what's coming. Precisely, the emissary confirmed. And this is why we watch, why we have always watched. Earth is approaching a critical threshold that occurs cyclically in planetary evolution. Your sun is entering a period of increased energetic output. Your planet's magnetic field is weakening and preparing to shift. The electromagnetic environment that human consciousness has adapted to for thousands of years is changing rapidly. For most humans, this will feel like the world is going insane. Their biological receivers are not calibrated for the new frequencies. The vision showed me Earth's magnetic field fluctuating, solar storms intensifying, and the effect on human consciousness. I saw people becoming more polarized, more unstable, more prone to fear and violence as their neurological systems struggled to process the changing energetic environment. Mental illness spiking, suicide rates climbing, social cohesion fracturing. But the marked ones, the emissary said, Your enhanced genetics allow you to adapt, to recalibrate, to hold steady as the frequencies shift. And in holding steady, you create stabilization fields that others can synchronize with. You become human lightning rods, grounding the excess energy so it doesn't destroy those around you. This has happened before, I said, understanding flooding through me. The dimensional shifts, the transitions, they're not unique to our time. Every 26,000 years approximately, the emissary confirmed, your ancient cultures remembered these cycles, precession of the equinoxes, the great year, the Hindu yugas, the Mayan long count. They all pointed to the same cyclical phenomenon, a shift that transforms everything, consciousness, civilization, the very structure of reality as your species experiences it. Some cycles are gentle, others are catastrophic. The marked ones determine which type of transition occurs. I floated there in that impossible space, watching Earth turn beneath me, watching the marked ones scattered across its surface like acupuncture needles in the body of humanity. And I understood finally why the number mattered. I floated there in that impossible space, watching Earth turn beneath me, watching the marked ones scattered across its surface like acupuncture needles in the body of humanity. And I understood finally why the number mattered, why the precision, why 144,000 and not 100,000 or 200,000. It was the minimum threshold, the critical mass required to tip the balance toward coherent transition rather than catastrophic collapse. But with understanding came a darker question that the emissary seemed to anticipate before I fully formed it. They know, it said, and the reverence that had colored its previous communications vanished, replaced by something that felt almost like warning. Your governments, your institutions, the organizations that operate in the shadows between official reality and hidden truth, they have known about the marking protocol for decades, some for much longer. The vision shifted, and I was looking at a military base I didn't recognize. Underground, massive, filled with technology that seemed decades beyond anything the public knew existed. Men in uniforms stood around examination tables where people, ordinary people with marks on their skin, lay unconscious. Scientists in lab coats cataloged the marks, took tissue samples, ran electromagnetic scans of the subject's biofields. 1947, the emissary said. Roswell was not the beginning, but it was the catalyst. When we allowed one of our craft to be recovered, it forced your governments to confront our existence. Treaties were negotiated, information was exchanged, and part of that exchange included knowledge about the marking protocol and what is coming for your planet. I watched as the vision jumped through decades, secret facilities, classified programs with names that sounded innocuous, projects designed to identify, track, and catalog individuals with unusual electromagnetic signatures. They weren't looking for aliens. They were looking for us, the marked ones. But why? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Why would they suppress this? Why not tell people the truth? Control, the emissary replied simply. If humanity understood what you are learning now, the existing power structures would collapse overnight. Religious institutions that claim authority over spiritual truth would be exposed as gatekeepers of distorted information. Governments that claim sovereignty would be revealed as middle managers in a cosmic hierarchy they barely comprehend. Economic systems built on scarcity and competition would crumble when people understood that abundance and cooperation are the natural states of evolved civilizations. The vision showed me meetings in underground bunkers, men in expensive suits and military uniforms discussing the marked ones as if we were assets, resources to be controlled. Some argued for weaponization. Could the frequency-holding abilities be harnessed, turned into some kind of consciousness weapon? Others argued for elimination. If the transition required the marked ones, then preventing the transition meant removing the anchors. The Church's interpretation, the emissary continued, and I felt anger radiate from it for the first time. The doctrine that the 144,000 must be virgin Jewish males from specific tribes. This was not accidental misunderstanding. It was strategic misinformation promoted by those who knew the truth but wanted to ensure the real marked ones would never recognize themselves. If people believed the mark was religious, tribal, exclusive to one group, they would never look for it in the atheist scientist, the Muslim teacher, the Buddhist carpenter, the pagan artist. I saw documents, actual classified documents from Vatican archives, Pentagon databases, think tanks funded by corporations whose names I recognized, plans to discredit abductees, protocols for psychiatric commitment of individuals who claimed contact, media strategies to associate alien encounters with mental illness, substance abuse, attention-seeking behavior. It was coordinated, systematic, a multi-generational campaign to ensure that anyone who experienced what I was experiencing would either stay silent or be destroyed if they spoke. Some of your people fought back, the emissary said, and the vision showed me faces I recognized from my late-night research. People who'd gone public with their experiences, whistleblowers from government programs, researchers who'd gotten too close to the truth. Watch what happened to them. I watched careers destroyed by sudden scandals that appeared too convenient to be coincidental. I watched people die in accidents that didn't make sense. Car crashes where the mechanics found evidence of tampering, heart attacks in healthy 30-year-olds, suicides that the victims' families swore were murders. I watched families torn apart, reputations shredded, lives ruined with surgical precision. They are afraid, the emissary said. Not of us, of you. Of what happens when the marked ones awaken and recognize each other. Of what happens when 144,000 people who can hold coherent frequency during chaos begin to organize, to communicate, to understand their role. You represent the end of their control, the end of their ability to manipulate human consciousness through fear and division. The vision showed me something that made my blood run cold. Lists, databases, names and addresses and photographs of people I'd seen in my earlier visions. The marked ones. They were being tracked, monitored. Some were under active surveillance. Others had been approached, recruited into programs where their abilities were studied under the guise of psychic research or consciousness studies. And a few had simply disappeared. They cannot stop the transition, the emissary said. The cosmic cycles do not bend to human will, but they can try to control how it unfolds. If they identify and neutralize enough of the marked ones before the critical phase begins, they believe they can maintain their power structures through the chaos. They believe they can be the ones who decide which version of humanity emerges on the other side. Are we in danger? I asked, and the emissary's response was immediate. You have been in danger since the moment you were marked, since the moment you agreed to incarnate into this role. They do not know who you are yet. Your mark is recent. Your awakening is new. But if you speak publicly, if you try to find others like you without caution, you will become visible to those who hunt the marked ones. You have been in danger since the moment you were marked, since the moment you agreed to incarnate into this role. They do not know who you are yet. Your mark is recent. Your awakening is new. But if you speak publicly, If you try to find others like you without caution, you will become visible to those who hunt the marked ones. The weight of that truth settled into my bones like lead, but before I could fully process the implications, the emissary's presence intensified. The space around us shifted again, and I felt the quality of the information about to be transmitted change. Everything before this moment had been context, preparation. What came next was the reason for all of it. You need to understand what is coming, the emissary said, and the vision expanded to show me Earth from a perspective that transcended normal space. I could see the planet not just as a physical sphere, but as a living energetic system, pulsing with electromagnetic fields, wrapped in layers of consciousness that extended far beyond the atmosphere. Your planet is entering a phase of accelerated frequency shift, it continued. Your ancient texts gave it many names: the tribulation, the apocalypse, the great purification, the end times, but these terms carry implications of punishment, of divine judgment, that distort the true nature of what occurs. This is not punishment. This is evolution, inevitable, cyclical, as natural as a caterpillar entering a cocoon. I watched as the vision showed me Earth's electromagnetic field fluctuating wildly, the north and south poles weakening, wandering, preparing for something that looked like a complete reversal. Solar activity intensifying far beyond normal cycles, coronal mass ejections bombarding the planet with charged particles that interacted with human consciousness in ways mainstream science didn't understand yet. The Schumann resonance, I breathed, recognizing some of what I was seeing. The base electromagnetic frequency of Earth. It's been stable at 7.83 Hertz for thousands of years, but it's spiking now, sometimes reaching 30 Hertz or higher. Your scientists are noticing, the emissary confirmed. But they do not yet understand the implications. Human consciousness evolved in resonance with Earth's electromagnetic field. Your brain waves, your heart rhythms, your entire neurological system is calibrated to the planet's base frequency. When that frequency shifts dramatically, consciousness shifts with it, or fractures trying. The vision showed me what that fracturing looked like. People unable to think clearly, overwhelmed by emotions they couldn't regulate, losing their grip on consensus reality. Not metaphorically. Literally. I saw mental hospitals overflowing, suicide rates climbing exponentially, violence erupting as people's nervous systems overloaded with energies they couldn't process. And I saw the timeline. Not decades away, not even years, months, maybe weeks before the acceleration reached critical intensity. This is what your prophets saw, the emissary said, when they spoke of wars and rumors of wars, of nation rising against nation, of earthquakes and famines and pestilences. They were not seeing political conflicts or natural disasters. They were seeing the symptoms of consciousness trying to transition to a higher frequency without the infrastructure to support it. Humanity tearing itself apart because the electromagnetic environment it evolved within is transforming too rapidly for most to adapt. But it doesn't have to be catastrophic, I said, understanding crystallizing. That's why we're marked. That's why the 144,000 exist. Precisely, the emissary replied, and I felt something like hope color its transmission. You were marked because your energy signatures are stable enough to act as grounding points during the shift. Your enhanced genetics allow you to process the new frequencies without fragmenting. You become human lightning rods, drawing the excess electromagnetic energy through your systems and into the earth, preventing it from overwhelming those around you. The vision showed me the marked ones activating during the peak of the shift. I saw us glowing with coherent light while chaos swirled around us. People gravitated toward us instinctively, their own destabilized fields finding resonance with our stable ones. We weren't doing anything active, weren't trying to help or heal or save. We were simply being, holding steady, maintaining coherent frequency while everything else fluctuated wildly. And that steadiness created pockets of calm in the storm. Those who are not marked can still transition successfully, the emissary explained. The marking is not about exclusivity or being chosen above others. It is about function, about having the biological and energetic capacity to serve as anchors. Think of it like this. When a building sways in an earthquake, the structural supports prevent it from collapsing. The supports are not better than the walls or the floors. They are simply designed to bear different kinds of stress. You are the supports. The rest of humanity are the walls and floors and rooms where life actually happens. I watched as the vision showed me the two possible timelines. In one, the marked ones remained unaware, scattered, unable to fulfill their function. The transition happened anyway. Cosmic cycles don't wait for human readiness, but without the stabilization network, billions of people lost coherence. Civilization collapsed not from external disaster, but from collective psychosis as human consciousness shattered under frequencies it couldn't integrate. In the other timeline, enough of the marked ones awakened, recognized their role, found each other, and created a network of stability points across the planet. The transition still brought chaos, still challenged every certainty, still forced humanity through the most difficult passage in its history. But coherence held. Enough people made it through intact. The species evolved rather than devolved. The outcome is not predetermined, the emissary said. This is why we mark you now, why we wake you up before the peak intensity arrives. You need time to understand, to prepare, to find others and create the network that will hold when everything else falls apart. The outcome is not predetermined, the emissary said. This is why we mark you now, why we wake you up before the peak intensity arrives. You need time to understand, to prepare, to find others, and create the network that will hold when everything else falls apart. The vision faded, and I was back in my body on that metallic table. The paralysis had lifted completely now. I could move my fingers, turn my head, draw breath without the crushing weight of invisible force. The three beings stood around me, silent, waiting, and I realized with sudden clarity that this moment, this specific moment, was the fulcrum point, the choice that would determine not just my future, but potentially the future of everyone connected to me. I can offer you a choice, the emissary said, and for the first time since this began, I heard something almost like compassion in its voice. We do not force this role upon anyone. The contract you made before birth included free will clauses, escape routes. You can choose to forget. The being raised one elongated hand, and I saw something shimmer in the air between us, a kind of light that felt like erasure, like the promise of returning to the comfortable numbness of my former life. If you choose, it continued, we will remove these memories, not crudely, not leaving gaps that torment you. We will weave the timeline back together so seamlessly, you will never know this conversation occurred. The mark will remain. It cannot be undone. But you will not recognize it, will not understand its significance. You will return to your research, your daughter, your comfortable skepticism. You will live out this incarnation in peace, and when you die, you will return to the space between lives having never fulfilled the contract you agreed to. And if I refuse the erasure? I asked, though I already knew. Then your life as you knew it ends tonight, the emissary replied with absolute honesty. You will carry knowledge that isolates you from consensus reality. You will see patterns others cannot see. You will know what is coming while everyone around you remains asleep. You will have to find others like you without exposing yourself to those who hunt the marked ones. You will be called crazy, conspiracy theorist, delusional, New Age lunatic. Your colleagues will distance themselves. Your credibility will be questioned. Your daughter may struggle to understand why her father has changed. The being paused, and I felt the weight of every word. You will be monitored by both allies and enemies. Some of our kind will help guide you. Others of your kind who have awakened before you will recognize you and offer support. But the shadow organizations, the government programs, the institutions that fear what you represent, they will eventually notice you. And when they do, you will face choices between safety and truth that no one should have to make. I thought of Emma, 16 years old, already dealing with her parents' divorce, already navigating the minefield of adolescence. How would she handle her father suddenly talking about aliens and dimensional shifts and the end of the world as we know it? Would she think I'd lost my mind? Would her mother use this as ammunition to restrict my visitation rights? I thought of my career, 20 years building credibility in the scientific community, published papers, tenure, respect from peers. All of it would evaporate the moment I spoke publicly about what I'd experienced. I'd be lumped in with every crackpot and charlatan who'd ever claimed alien contact. Everything I'd worked for, destroyed. I thought of my comfortable apartment, my familiar routines, my carefully constructed life where the biggest stress was grant applications and peer reviews, the safety of certainty, the ease of skepticism that required no courage, no risk, no vulnerability. The emissary waited, patient, while I wrestled with the weight of forever. But if I accept, I said slowly, if I choose to remember and understand and act on this knowledge, I'll be fulfilling something I agreed to before I was born, a soul contract. Yes, the emissary confirmed. Before you incarnated into the body of Daniel Frost, you stood in a place beyond time and chose this specific life because it would position you perfectly for this role. You chose your intelligence, your scientific training, your skeptical mind, all of it designed to make you an effective bridge between worlds when the time came. You volunteered knowing it would be difficult, knowing you would doubt, knowing you would suffer, and you agreed anyway, because you understood the stakes. I closed my eyes and saw the vision again. The two timelines, humanity fragmenting into psychosis or evolving into coherence. Billions of people whose fate depended on whether enough of the marked ones awakened in time to create the stabilization network. I saw my daughter's face in both timelines. In one, she was among the lost, her bright mind shattered by frequencies she couldn't integrate. In the other, she survived because someone, maybe me, maybe another marked one, held steady near enough for her to anchor to. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I remember reading once, I said, opening my eyes to meet the emissary's impossible gaze, that the opposite of courage isn't cowardice. It's comfort. And I've been comfortable for too long. I sat up on the table, my body responding to my will for the first time since this encounter began. The three beings stepped back, and I swear I felt something like approval radiate from them. I accept, I said, and the words felt like they were being carved into my soul. I'll remember. I'll find the others. I'll do whatever I agreed to do before I was born, even if I don't fully remember agreeing to it. I'll fulfill the contract." The emissary tilted its head, and I saw something in those black eyes that might have been respect. "Then we will guide you as much as we can," it said. "But Daniel, the hardest part is not what we ask you to do. The hardest part is what you must become. Then we will guide you as much as we can," it said. "But Daniel, the hardest part is not what we ask you to do. The hardest part is what you must become." Before I could ask what that meant, the room dissolved. Not gradually, not with the cinematic fade I'd experienced before. Reality simply reassembled itself around me, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my apartment, fully clothed, my heart racing but my body intact. The clock on my nightstand read 3:17 in the morning. I'd been gone for 4 hours, though it had felt both longer and shorter than that. The mark on my wrist pulsed once, warm beneath my skin, and I knew without being told that this was confirmation. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that the choice I'd made was real and binding and irreversible. I stood on shaking legs and went to my laptop. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose I didn't fully understand, typing search terms that felt guided by something beyond my conscious mind. Marked ones awakening, frequency holders, 144,000 activation. And this time, when the results appeared, I saw them differently, not as delusions or fantasy, but as breadcrumbs left by others who'd walked this path before me. Testimonies, warnings, instructions hidden in plain sight for those with eyes to see. The emissary's final words echoed in my mind as I read, "Find the others. Share the truth carefully. Prepare for the signs that the transition is accelerating." I started a document. Not for publication, not yet. But I needed to record what had happened while the memories were fresh, while the weight of the experience still pressed against my chest, like a physical thing. I wrote for 3 hours straight, my hands cramping, my eyes burning, but unable to stop until I'd captured every detail, every vision, every impossible truth I'd been shown. When dawn broke through my window, I finally stopped typing and looked at what I'd created. 23 pages. A testimony that would destroy my credibility if I shared it publicly. But also a map, a guide for others who might be experiencing what I was experiencing, who might be marked and confused and desperate for confirmation that they weren't losing their minds. I saved the document with a file name that felt significant, the Awakening Protocol. Over the next 3 days, I began to see them, the others. It started small. A woman at the coffee shop near campus with her sleeve rolled up, 3 interlocking circles visible on her forearm. She caught me staring, and her eyes widened with recognition before she quickly pulled her sleeve down and left without ordering. A man at the grocery store with symbols on his neck that looked like circuit boards drawn in light. A teenager on the bus with spirals on both palms that she kept trying to hide with her phone. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, and now that I knew what to look for, I couldn't unsee them. I started noticing other patterns too. The news felt different, more chaotic. Stories that didn't make sense, mass bird deaths, unexplained sounds heard around the world, reports of people experiencing shared dreams. The Schumann resonance monitors I'd started checking compulsively showed spikes that should have been impossible. Solar activity ramping up beyond predicted models. The electromagnetic environment of Earth was shifting, exactly as the emissary had shown me, and the symptoms were manifesting in ways both subtle and terrifying. I tried to approach one of the marked ones, the woman from the coffee shop. I found her 3 days later at the university library, and when our eyes met, something passed between us. Recognition, fear, relief. We sat in a quiet corner, and she told me her story in whispers. Abduction 6 months ago. Mark on her arm that wouldn't fade. Dreams of the transition. Terror that she was going insane. And then tears of gratitude when I showed her my own mark and told her she wasn't alone. Her name was Sarah. She was a social worker, 34 years old, divorced with 2 kids, and she'd been carrying this secret in isolation, convinced she was broken until I confirmed that what she'd experienced was real. We exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch, to find others and create the network that the emissary said we'd need. That conversation gave me the courage to do what I'm doing now. Recording this testimony, sharing it, even though I know what it will cost me. Because if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far into my story, and something inside you is resonating with recognition rather than dismissal, then maybe you're one of us. Maybe you've experienced missing time, or found marks on your body you can't explain, or felt like reality is shifting beneath your feet in ways you can't articulate. Maybe you've been marked and don't know it yet. The emissary told me that fewer than 12,000 had been confirmed when I was taken. That means there are 132,000 others out there who will be marked in the coming months. People who will wake up confused and terrified and desperate for answers. This recording is for them. For you, if you're one of them. The signs are accelerating. The transition is coming faster than anyone expected, and we need to find each other before it's too late. Before the institutions that hunt us identify too many of us. Before the frequency shift reaches critical intensity and the world descends into the chaos I was shown. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if sharing this will make me a target or a guide, but I know I made a choice on that table, and I'm honoring it now. I'm Daniel Frost. I'm an astrophysicist from Boulder, Colorado. I'm 42 years old. I have a daughter I love more than my own life, and I'm one of the 144,000. If you're watching this and something inside you just woke up, if you felt that shock of recognition, that impossible knowing, then welcome. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And we have work to do. The marked ones are waking up. Find your mark. Find each other. And prepare for what's coming. Because ready or not, the transition has already begun.